On August 9, 1965, a prime minister went on national television and began to cry. Singapore was starting its life as a sovereign nation because its parent country had just forced it out. Expelled from Malaysia, Singapore was left to fend for itself. It was a tiny, suddenly independent island without resources to support its own weight. Survival was a mathematical longshot. With zero natural resources and no military, hostile neighbors threatened to cut off supplies. The internal reality was just as grim. In the mid-1960s, most of the population lived in crowded slums, lacking basic sanitation and facing a job market where more than 10% of the workforce was unemployed. While foreign observers predicted a total collapse, Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew rejected the idea of failure. He viewed the nation's survival as a technical problem that could be solved through ruthless, calculated engineering. Before Singapore could think about prosperity, it had to neutralize the immediate, fatal chokeholds that threatened to end the experiment before it began: defense and water. As the British military withdrew their protection, Lee turned to India and Egypt for help building a defense force. He sent letters pleading for military instructors to train his people, but his requests were met with weeks of silence. Running out of options, Lee took a highly classified gamble. He recruited military commanders from that was also small, isolated, and heavily militarized. These officers entered Singapore in secret, traveling on fake Mexican passports to avoid detection by hostile neighbors. These advisors were from Israel. To avoid political blowback from the surrounding region, the alliance was hidden for 35 years, while these officers built the foundation of what is now one of Asia's most advanced militaries. With the borders secured, Lee addressed the second threat: dehydration. Singapore relied entirely on Malaysia for fresh water, and the Malaysian government had already threatened to turn off the supply if Singapore stepped out of line. Lee engineered what he called the four taps strategy. He built massive reservoirs to catch every drop of rain, installed desalination plants for seawater, and pioneered a system to recycle wastewater into clean, industrial-grade drinking water. By securing the borders and the water supply, Lee bought his nation enough stability to face its next challenge: creating an economy from nothing. In the 1960s, most newly independent nations were busy nationalizing their industries and expelling foreign companies. They viewed Western corporations as a threat to their newfound sovereignty. Singapore did the opposite. Lacking its own capital or a local market, Lee began aggressively wooing Western corporations with tax holidays, cheap land, and a strict legal ban on worker strikes to ensure a perfectly disciplined workforce. The results were immediate. Global giants like HP and Texas Instruments set up assembly lines, transforming a population of unskilled laborers into a global manufacturing hub within a single generation. Productivity was engineered down to the physical environment. Lee credited air conditioning as one of the most important inventions for his country's success, mandating its use in government offices to maintain human performance in the tropical heat. But the wealth generated by these factories wouldn't matter if the country's diverse ethnic groups continued to fracture the social order. Singapore was a mix of Chinese, Malay, and Indian populations, and racial tensions frequently boiled over into violent riots. Most of the people were still living in ethnic enclaves within the slums. The government solution was the Housing and Development Board. They began bulldozing slums and replacing them with high-rise apartment blocks. But to force cohesion, they implemented a strict legal quota. Every building was required to have a specific mix of ethnic groups living together. Over several decades, a mandatory savings plan transitioned the population from the slums into these organized blocks. Today, approximately 90% of residents in these government-built units own their homes, giving nearly every citizen a direct stake in the country's stability. To make this diverse workforce compatible with the world, Lee made English the official working language. It was a move that faced heavy local resistance, but it ensured every citizen could operate in the global financial market. Finally, to eradicate corruption, Lee created a Central Investigations Bureau with absolute power. He combined harsh criminal penalties for bribery with high corporate-level salaries for civil servants, making it more profitable to be honest than to be corrupt. This combination of industrial planning and strict social control created the foundation for one of the most rapid economic expansions in modern history. The data reflects this multi-decade surge. In 1965, the average annual income was roughly $500. Today, that figure exceeds $100,000, surpassing both Japan and the United States. Singapore has become a global standard for infrastructure and efficiency. Its GDP has grown from $1 billion at independence to over $450 billion today, supported by one of the world's most powerful passports and busiest ports. But this version of utopia was built on a trade-off. A single party has held power since 1959. To maintain this level of order, the government enforces strict limits on press freedom and draconian laws that regulate everything from speech to public assembly. Singapore is a finished product of pragmatic engineering. It successfully traded a swamp for a global financial hub, but it leaves you with an uncomfortable question. Would you trade your political freedoms for a guarantee of wealth, order, and safety?